You open your eyes before the sun has fully risen, and for a few brief seconds there is silence, a fragile stillness in which the truth almost has a chance to reach you. But then the machine begins again. The alarm cuts through the darkness like a command, not a suggestion, and before your mind has even gathered itself, your hand moves almost automatically toward the device beside your bed. You do not think, you react. That is how the prison keeps you, not with iron bars, not with locked doors, but with reflex, with habit, with invisible strings attached to every weak impulse you have allowed to survive inside you. You tell yourself it is just another morning, just another routine, but what you call routine is often the first chain around your neck. The moment your fingers touch that screen, the world begins to tell you who you are before you have had the courage to decide for yourself. Notifications, messages, images of lives that seem ahead of yours, noise, endless, relentless noise. And before your feet even touch the floor, your mind is already no longer your own. This is how the Matrix begins its work, not in some dramatic collapse, not in some grand conspiracy whispered in dark rooms, but in the small surrender of your attention, the quiet theft of your focus, the daily erosion of your will. You think you are free because no one is forcing you, but the deepest prisons are the ones where the prisoner believes he is choosing the cage. Look at your life with brutal honesty. How many days have passed that looked exactly the same? How many mornings have dissolved into the same empty motions, the same distractions, the same promises that tonight you will change, that tomorrow you will become more disciplined, stronger, sharper, more dangerous to your own weakness? And yet tomorrow arrives carrying the same version of you. That is not coincidence. That is conditioning. You have been trained to survive in comfort, not to conquer yourself. The world around you rewards distraction because a distracted mind is easy to control. A mind constantly fed with pleasure, convenience, and escape loses the muscle required to endure discomfort. And make no mistake, your growth lives on the other side of discomfort, but you have been taught to avoid it. Every system around you whispers the same seductive lie. Stay comfortable, stay entertained, stay numb. Never sit long enough with your own thoughts to hear the voice beneath the noise, the voice that asks the question you spend your life avoiding. What are you becoming? There is a reason that question terrifies so many people, because deep down, you already know the answer. You know when you have been betraying yourself. You know when you have traded purpose for ease. You know the exact moments where you chose immediate relief over long-term strength. And those moments, repeated over months and years, become identity. People think lives collapse in grand tragedies, but most lives decay in silence, in repetition, in the slow death of standards. You do not wake up one day suddenly broken. You wake up one day and realize you have spent years becoming less than what you could have been. That realization is the first crack in the illusion. The Matrix does not want you to see this. It wants you busy, overstimulated, exhausted by meaningless pursuits, so that you never confront the emptiness of living beneath your potential. It wants you to confuse movement with progress, busyness with purpose, consumption with growth. You scroll and call it research. You talk and call it planning. You fantasize and call it ambition. But the truth is harsher than your pride wants to admit. None of that matters if action does not follow. This prison survives because it convinces you that thinking about change is the same as changing. It is not. The gap between the man you are and the man you claim you want to become is built from the choices you make when nobody is watching. It is built in the mornings when the bed feels warmer than your mission. It is built in the evenings when the screen feels easier than the work. It is built every time you say later to something that should have been done now. Later is one of the most dangerous words in the human mind. Later has buried more dreams than failure ever did. Later is where discipline goes to die. And every time you choose later, you strengthen the architecture of your own prison. You must understand something that few people are willing to face. Weakness rarely feels like weakness in the moment. It often feels like comfort. It feels harmless. It feels deserved. One more hour of sleep. One more day before starting. One more excuse because life is difficult. But weakness does not announce itself with a warning sign. It enters quietly, disguised as mercy, disguised as rest, disguised as self-compassion, until one day you can no longer distinguish between peace and surrender. The Matrix thrives in that confusion. It teaches you to soothe every discomfort instantly. Hungry? Consume. Bored? Scroll. Sad? Escape. Anxious? Distract yourself. At no point are you taught to sit with pain and let it shape you. Yet pain, endured consciously, is often the forge of character. Without it, you remain soft. And softness in spirit is what the prison depends on. A soft mind cannot hold discipline. A soft will cannot withstand resistance. A soft identity collapses under pressure. The world has taught you to fear pressure, when in truth, pressure reveals you. It exposes the distance between your words and your character. Anyone can speak about ambition in moments of comfort. Anyone can promise greatness in the safety of imagination. But what do you do when the morning is cold, when the body is tired, when the results are invisible, when no one is applauding? That is where the truth lives. That is where the matrix separates the dreamers from the disciplined. You may not realize it yet, but every ordinary day is a test of sovereignty over yourself. Who owns your attention? Who commands your body? Who directs your mind? If the answer is your impulses, your moods, your cravings, then you are not free. Freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. That is the lie that keeps people trapped in self-indulgence. True freedom is the ability to do what must be done, even when you do not want to do it. That is mastery. That is power. But most people never reach it because they spend their lives negotiating with weakness. They wake up and ask themselves how they feel before deciding how they will act. That question alone has ruined countless lives. Your feelings are weather. Your standards must be architecture. If your actions depend on mood, then your life will always remain unstable. The prison understands this deeply. It feeds inconsistency because inconsistency prevents transformation. A distracted mind cannot build momentum. A fragmented identity cannot hold purpose. This is why so many people feel stuck, not because they lack intelligence, talent, or opportunity, but because they have surrendered authorship of their days to whatever emotion happens to arrive first. And emotion, left unchecked, is a poor leader. There comes a moment in every life where the illusion begins to crack, where the mirror becomes impossible to avoid. You look at yourself and you know. No one has to tell you. You know the truth in the quietest part of your mind. You know you have been living beneath your standard. You know you have been tolerating weakness in places where discipline should rule. You know you have allowed yourself to become comfortable with excuses. That moment is painful, but it is sacred. Because pain, when faced honestly, becomes awareness. And awareness is the first step out of the prison. The matrix loses power the moment you stop lying to yourself. When you stop blaming circumstances, stop waiting for perfect timing, stop pretending that tomorrow will magically produce a stronger version of you without the suffering required to create him, then something changes. You begin to see the bars for what they are. They were never outside you. They were built from your habits, your compromises, your repeated surrender to lesser impulses. And that means they can be broken, but only if you are willing to become ruthless with yourself, not cruel. Ruthless in truth, ruthless in honesty, ruthless in discipline. Because no one is coming to rescue you from a prison you continue to rebuild every day. This is the brutal beauty of it. The same choices that imprisoned you can also free you. The same mornings that once began in surrender can begin in command. The same mind that once obeyed distraction can be retrained into focus. But it starts with a decision so sharp it cuts through every excuse you have ever made. A decision that you will no longer participate in your own weakening. A decision that comfort will no longer be your God. A decision that every day from this point forward will be an act of rebellion against the version of yourself that has kept you small. Because the prison is not just the world around you. It is the smaller self within you, the one that seeks relief over growth, pleasure over purpose, safety over truth. And until you confront that self, you will continue to live in circles, mistaking motion for progress, years for growth, existence for life. But the moment you decide to face yourself fully, without illusion, without self-pity, without negotiation, the escape begins. Not all at once, not dramatically. It begins in the unseen places, in the discipline of your mornings, in the silence before distraction, in the moments where you choose action over comfort. Brick by brick, habit by habit, thought by thought, you dismantle the prison from within. And one day, when you look back at the person you used to be, you will realize the matrix was never stronger than your will. It was only stronger than your awareness. Now you see it. And once seen, it can never fully hide again. It always begins in a moment so ordinary that most people would never recognize it as the battlefield where their life is being decided. Maybe it is 6 in the morning, in a small apartment where the air still carries the heaviness of unfinished sleep. The room is dim, the curtain barely letting in the first pale line of dawn, and your alarm has already rung twice. Your body feels heavy. Your mind instantly starts bargaining, and the first thought that enters is never noble. It never says, "Rise and build your future." It says something quieter, softer, more dangerous. 5 more minutes. That is where the real story of discipline begins, not in grand speeches, not in cinematic moments of triumph, but in that silent negotiation between the person you are and the person you claim you want to become. In real life, discipline rarely looks heroic. It looks like getting out of bed when every muscle asks for comfort. It looks like washing your face in cold water while your mind is still clouded with resistance. It looks like putting on your shoes in a room where no one is watching, where there is no applause, no camera, no audience to validate your effort. The world often romanticizes transformation, but the truth is brutally plain. Your future is decided in rooms like this, in mornings like this, in choices so small they seem insignificant until they are repeated for years. You step into the kitchen, and there it is again, the second battlefield. The phone on the table lights up. Messages, social media notifications, headlines designed to hijack your mind before it has a chance to stand on its own feet. This is not an abstract philosophical war. This is your real life. This is the exact place where discipline either lives or dies. Because discipline is not simply about doing hard things. It is about protecting the sovereignty of your attention. Most people lose the day before the day even begins because they allow the outside world to enter their mind first. They wake up and immediately become a servant to noise. The opinions of strangers, the lives of others, the endless flood of information, all of it rushes in before they have even spoken a single word to themselves. Then they wonder why they feel scattered, anxious, weak, and stuck. The answer is simple and brutal, because their mind no longer belongs to them. Now imagine another real scene, one that almost everyone knows. It is late at night. You have just come home from work or school, drained, frustrated, mentally exhausted from carrying responsibilities all day. Your body wants escape. The couch looks inviting. The bed feels like surrender disguised as rest. The screen in your hand promises instant relief. This is where discipline reveals its true nature. It is not built when life is easy. It is built when life is heavy. In these moments, your mind begins its familiar script. You deserve a break. You had a hard day. You can start tomorrow. And on the surface, these thoughts sound reasonable. They even sound compassionate. But beneath them is a deeper question. Are you resting to recover, or are you escaping to avoid becoming stronger? Most people never ask themselves this. They collapse into habits because habits require less confrontation with the self. One episode becomes 3. A few minutes of scrolling becomes hours. One missed workout becomes a missed week. One delayed task becomes a pattern of avoidance. This is how lives drift, not through catastrophe, but through permission. Discipline is the refusal to give yourself the kind of permission that slowly destroys your standards. It is the voice that cuts through the fog and says, "No, not today. We do what must be done." That voice does not need to be loud. In fact, in real life, it often comes as a cold, calm command, a quiet decision, a refusal to negotiate with weakness. The truth no one tells you is that discipline often feels deeply unglamorous. It is boring, repetitive, silent. It is making your bed when it seems meaningless. It is showing up to the gym on a rainy day when the city outside feels half asleep. It is opening your laptop to work on your goals after 10 exhausting hours of responsibilities. It is choosing the long-term pain of effort over the short-term pleasure of relief. In real life, nobody claps for this. Nobody notices. Sometimes the people around you may even misunderstand it. They may call you extreme. They may say you are too serious, too obsessed, too hard on yourself. But what they often fail to understand is that discipline is not punishment. It is self-respect in action. When you keep promises to yourself, something changes in your psychology. You begin to trust yourself. And trust in oneself is one of the rarest forms of power. Most people do not suffer because life is impossible. They suffer because they no longer believe their own word. They have told themselves too many times that they would start, improve, rise, change, and then failed to follow through. Over time, this creates an invisible fracture in identity. Every broken promise becomes evidence. I am inconsistent. I am weak. I never finish. These beliefs do not appear from nowhere. They are built through repetition, and discipline, in the real world, is the process of reversing that evidence one action at a time. Imagine yourself sitting at a desk in the middle of the afternoon. Work has piled up. Your mind is tired. There are easier things to do. Check messages, open another tab, distract yourself with something that feels productive but is not truly essential. This is where discipline becomes deeply practical. It is not a philosophical slogan. It is the ability to remain in the chair and finish what matters, to stay with the discomfort of focus, to resist the urge to flee into easy stimulation. In modern life, this may be one of the highest forms of discipline, the ability to sustain attention in a world engineered to fracture it. Every notification is a test. Every impulse is a fork in the road. And each time you choose focus over fragmentation, you are not just completing a task, you are rebuilding your mind. Real discipline is visible in how you handle ordinary frustrations. Someone disrespects you, a plan falls apart, traffic delays you, your efforts go unnoticed, results do not arrive fast enough. In these moments, most people become emotional prisoners. They lash out, complain, collapse into victimhood, or use frustration as an excuse to abandon the process. But discipline in real life means emotional governance. It means refusing to let temporary frustration dictate permanent decisions. It means holding your standard, even when your emotions are in chaos. This is where stoic strength enters the story. You do not control the world, but you do control your response. And in real life, that response is what defines character. The disciplined person is not someone who never feels anger, exhaustion, fear, or temptation. It is someone who has trained themselves not to obey every feeling. There is a profound difference between feeling something and surrendering to it. That difference is where freedom lives. Consider another familiar scene: the gym after a long day. The body is tired, the mind is full, and every excuse feels justified. Yet you walk in anyway. The weights do not care about your mood. The treadmill does not care about your excuses. This is why physical discipline becomes such a powerful metaphor for life. It teaches the body a lesson the mind desperately needs. Progress comes from repeated resistance. No muscle grows without tension. No character grows without struggle. In the real world, discipline is the willingness to seek useful resistance instead of running from it. It is choosing the difficult conversation instead of silence, choosing the hard truth instead of a comforting lie, choosing to build instead of complain, choosing to move when your lesser self begs you to stop. Day after day, these moments accumulate. They may seem small while living them, but over months and years they transform identity. You no longer become someone who occasionally acts disciplined. You become a disciplined person. That distinction matters, because once discipline becomes identity, action stops depending on motivation. You do not ask whether you feel like doing it. You do it because it is what you do. This is the secret that changes everything. In real life, discipline is not an event. It is architecture. It is the structure upon which every meaningful life is built. The student who studies when others procrastinate. The worker who continues building skills after hours. The creator who writes when inspiration is absent. The athlete who trains in silence. The entrepreneur who keeps going through uncertainty. None of these people are free from resistance. They simply no longer worship comfort. And that is what separates the ordinary from the exceptional. The ordinary person seeks relief. The exceptional person seeks growth. When you truly understand this, your daily life changes. Every ordinary moment becomes sacred. Every decision becomes a vote for identity. The morning alarm, the food you choose, the work you postpone or complete, the way you respond to stress, the hours you waste or invest. These are not isolated actions. They are the language through which you tell life who you are becoming. Discipline is not a punishment imposed from outside. It is a declaration from within. I refuse to live beneath my potential any longer. And once that declaration becomes real, the world begins to feel different. The same streets, the same room, the same responsibilities, but a different mind inhabits them. A mind that no longer bends so easily. A mind that understands that greatness is not built in rare moments of inspiration, but in the quiet, repeated victories of everyday life. That is where discipline lives, in reality. in routine, in repetition, in the moments everyone else overlooks. And that is precisely why it is so powerful. The turning point does not arrive the way most people imagine. It does not come with thunder, dramatic music, or some cinematic moment where your entire life suddenly changes overnight. The real twist is far more unsettling, because it forces you to confront something you were never taught to see. The problem was never a lack of discipline. Read that again, and let it hit with full force. The issue was never that you were born weak, lazy, or incapable of consistency. The issue is that your discipline has been active all along. You have simply been using it against yourself. This is the reality almost no one talks about, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Every day you already prove that you are disciplined. You wake up at almost the same hour. You follow the same mental loops. You repeat the same emotional reactions. You reach for the same distractions at the same time. You surrender to the same cravings with astonishing consistency. That is not randomness. That is discipline. But it is unconscious discipline. Discipline in service of a lower identity. This is why the average person remains trapped for years, while believing they just need more willpower. No. What they need is awareness of the system they are already obeying. Because what you repeat, you reinforce. And what you reinforce becomes who you are. Here is the twist that makes most people stop and rethink everything. Your life right now is not the result of occasional decisions. It is the visible outcome of a hidden operating system. Your habits are not isolated actions. They are evidence of an internal identity script running beneath your awareness. You do not simply procrastinate. Somewhere deep inside, you may have accepted the identity of someone who works best under pressure, someone who always starts late, someone who never quite finishes. You do not simply seek comfort. You may have accepted the identity of someone who deserves escape whenever life becomes difficult. And once an identity is accepted, the mind will fight to preserve it, even when it causes suffering. This is why people sabotage themselves at the exact moment progress begins. The mind protects familiarity more fiercely than it pursues happiness. Let that sink in. Most people are not addicted to failure itself. They are addicted to what is familiar, even if that familiarity is pain. The known misery of the current self often feels safer than the unknown demands of growth. That is the new reality. You are not fighting laziness. You are fighting identity preservation. This is why motivation alone fails. Motivation tries to change behavior from the surface. Identity pulls it back from beneath. Think about real life. Have you ever had a day where you woke up inspired, made promises to yourself, worked hard for a few hours, maybe even a few days, only to suddenly collapse back into old patterns? It feels confusing at first. You ask yourself, why do I always go back? The answer is deeper than habit. You go back because your subconscious still believes the old version of you is home. Human beings are wired to return to what feels psychologically familiar. Even pain can become a home if you have lived in it long enough. This is why the breakthrough is not simply to work harder. The breakthrough is to realize that your current routine is already proof of your capacity for discipline. The question is no longer whether you can be disciplined. The real question is, what system are you being disciplined toward? Because every repeated action serves something. Every routine, every thought loop, every emotional response is building a version of you. If every night at the same hour you scroll for 2 hours, that is discipline. If every time stress appears, you automatically seek distraction, that is discipline. If every morning you hit snooze 3 times, that too is discipline. It is a trained response. The twist is brutal because it removes the comforting excuse that you are somehow missing a special quality other people possess. No, you already possess it. You are simply loyal to the wrong structure. And once this truth lands, everything changes. Suddenly, the issue is not, how do I become disciplined? The issue becomes, how do I redirect the discipline I already have? This is where reality opens in a new way. Most people think change requires becoming someone entirely different. But the deeper truth is that transformation often begins by repurposing the very mechanisms that once kept you trapped. The same consistency with which you once obeyed weakness can become the consistency with which you build strength. The same mental loops that once repeated self-doubt can be replaced with standards. The same ritual of escape can become a ritual of focus. You are not building from zero, you are redirecting force. That realization makes people stop and say, wait, so I was never powerless? Exactly. You were never powerless. You were patterned. And patterns can be rewritten. But here comes the even sharper twist, the part that most motivational scripts never tell you. The environment around you profits from your unconscious patterns. Modern life is not neutral. It is structured to keep your discipline pointed toward consumption instead of creation. Think about how your day is designed from the outside. The apps on your phone are built by teams of behavioral scientists whose job is to capture your attention. The content cycle is engineered to keep you emotionally reactive. The economy rewards your impulses far more than your restraint. Entire industries thrive on your inability to delay gratification. This means your struggle is not purely internal. It is structural. You are living in a reality where systems are actively competing for ownership of your discipline. That is the real matrix. It is not a fantasy. It is the architecture of modern attention. And once you realize that, the battle becomes clearer. Every time you pick up your phone without intention, your discipline is being spent. Every time you give your prime mental hours to meaningless consumption, your discipline is being invested in someone else's system. You think you are simply relaxing, but often you are training your mind to serve a cycle that does not belong to you. That is the twist that shocks people. The issue is not whether you are disciplined, but whose goals your discipline is currently serving. Is it serving your future, or is it serving the machinery of distraction? This new reality changes how you see ordinary life. The morning no longer starts with a neutral decision. It starts with a contest for your mind. The first hour of your day becomes sacred because it determines who gets your discipline first, you or the world. The moment you understand this, the simplest actions take on new meaning. Leaving the phone untouched in the morning is not a productivity hack. It is an act of reclaiming authorship over your consciousness. Sitting down to work before checking messages is not merely efficiency. It is rebellion against unconscious obedience. Even your fatigue begins to look different. Sometimes what you call tiredness is not physical exhaustion at all. Sometimes it is decision fatigue from constantly leaking attention into systems designed to fragment you. This is why so many people feel drained, despite doing so little that actually matters to them. Their discipline has been scattered across 100 tiny surrenders. Another perspective that changes everything is this. Your suffering may not come from doing too much, but from doing too much that is disconnected from meaning. A person can endure extraordinary hardship when the hardship serves a purpose, but meaningless repetition empties the spirit. This is why two people can work equally hard, yet one feels alive and the other feels dead inside. One is building identity through purpose, the other is merely surviving routine. The twist is that discipline without meaning becomes another prison. This is the piece often missing from conventional self-improvement. Discipline alone is not enough. It must be attached to something worthy. Otherwise, you simply become efficient at living someone else's script. So now the listener realizes something deeper. Escaping the matrix is not only about working harder. It is about asking who designed the life you are currently repeating. Were these goals chosen consciously or inherited unconsciously from society, family, fear, comparison, and expectation? This question changes everything because it shifts the focus from behavior to authorship. The most dangerous prison is not failure. It is unconscious success in a life that was never truly yours. Imagine climbing a ladder with perfect discipline for 10 years, only to discover it was leaning against the wrong wall. That is the nightmare many people call adulthood. The twist, then, is not just about discipline. It is about awareness, authorship, and the terrifying freedom of choosing your own reality. Once you see that your habits, your attention, and even your suffering are being shaped by systems both internal and external, you stop asking shallow questions. You stop asking, how do I stay motivated? And start asking, what am I unconsciously training myself to become every single day? That question hits differently. It forces the listener to look at their life not as a series of accidents, but as evidence. Evidence of what they have been rehearsing. Evidence of who they have been practicing being. And this is the final twist that makes people truly pause. Identity is rehearsal. Every day you rehearse a self, through thought, posture, choices, reactions, rituals. The self you call me is often nothing more than the most rehearsed version of your mind, which means a new self is not created by wishing for change. It is rehearsed into existence through repetition. Suddenly, the path forward is no longer mysterious. It is deeply practical and shockingly empowering. You do not need a miracle. You need a new rehearsal, new mornings, new standards, new responses to stress, new rituals that prove a different identity. The mind believes what the body repeatedly demonstrates. Once the listener understands this, the entire world shifts. The prison door was never locked. It was rehearsed shut. And now, for the first time, they realize they can rehearse their freedom. There comes a moment in every life when the noise finally fades, not because the world becomes quieter, but because something inside you becomes too tired to keep pretending. It is often not a dramatic moment. No one sees it. No one applauds it. It may happen late at night, in a room lit only by the pale light of a screen you no longer want to look at. It may happen in the mirror, when your own eyes hold you longer than usual. It may happen in the silence after another day that felt full on the outside and empty within. And in that moment, something settles heavily in your chest. Not panic, not even sadness at first, just a deep, unshakable knowing. A truth that has been following you for years finally sits down beside you and refuses to leave. You realize you are tired, but not the kind of tired sleep can fix. This is soul tired, the kind that comes from living too long at a distance from yourself, the kind that comes from waking every day and performing a version of life that no longer feels honest, the kind that comes from carrying the weight of your own unlived potential. That weight is strange, invisible to everyone else, yet crushing to the one who carries it. You smile in conversations, you handle responsibilities, you move through the rituals of daily life. Yet beneath all of it, there is a quiet grief, a grief for the person you could have been. And this is where the story slows down, because this is not about motivation anymore. This is about life, real life, the kind that unfolds in ordinary rooms, on ordinary mornings, in the quiet ache between who you are and who you know you can become. Sit with that for a moment. The greatest pain is rarely failure itself. It is the slow realization that you have been betraying your own standard. Not because you are evil, not because you are broken, but because somewhere along the way, you became comfortable with postponing yourself. Your real life, your real work, your real strength. Postponed. Again and again. Days become months, months become years. And one day you look back and the passage of time no longer feels abstract. It feels personal. You begin to understand that life is not merely moving forward. It is being spent. Every distracted morning, every promise delayed, every fear obeyed, every night surrendered to numbness, spent, gone, never returning. This is the part people rarely allow themselves to feel, because it is too honest. But honesty is where depth begins. Sometimes the deepest form of discipline is not action. It is the courage to stop running long enough to feel what your life has become, to sit in the consequences of your patterns without reaching for distraction, to let the silence speak. And when it does, it often says the words you have spent years avoiding. This is not the life you truly want. Those words can break a person open, because once you admit that truth, you can no longer hide inside excuses with the same comfort. Something shifts. The old stories begin to sound hollow. I'll start tomorrow. I'm just tired. I need the right moment. These phrases lose their power when measured against the finite nature of your life. Time becomes real. Mortality becomes real. You begin to see that the true tragedy is not that life is difficult. The true tragedy is that life is brief. Brief enough that repeated avoidance becomes destiny before you even realize it. There is a certain sadness in recognizing how much of yourself you have abandoned in exchange for comfort. The disciplined version of you, the courageous version of you, the clear, focused, sovereign version of you, left behind, not in one grand act, but in 1,000 small compromises. And this is where the emotional weight deepens, because the person you mourn is not someone else. It is you, a version of you that has been waiting patiently beneath the habits, beneath the fear, beneath the noise, waiting for the day you finally become honest enough to return. This is what makes the moment so human. It is not about becoming superhuman. It is about coming home to yourself, slowly, painfully, truthfully. There is something profoundly lonely about realizing that no one can do this part for you. Advice can guide you, inspiration can awaken you, but the confrontation with self must be walked alone. No one can sit in the silence for you. No one can face your reflection for you. No one can reclaim the wasted years for you. And yet, there is strange beauty in that loneliness, because within it lies the first taste of freedom. The moment you stop blaming the world, stop blaming circumstances, stop blaming the past, You also reclaim power. Painful power, yes, but power nonetheless. You begin to understand that your life is not asking you for perfection. It is asking you for presence, for honesty, for one real moment in which you stop lying to yourself. Maybe that moment happens when everyone else is asleep, and you are sitting alone, thinking about how fast the years have moved. Maybe it happens after another failure, another relapse into the same old cycle. And instead of numbing yourself, you simply sit there and let the disappointment speak. It says something deeper than shame. It says you know better, and knowing better hurts, because ignorance at least offers comfort. Awareness removes it. Once you truly see the gap between your values and your actions, every compromise begins to carry weight. The days no longer blur as easily. You start noticing how often you abandon yourself in small ways. The promise broken in the morning, the focus lost by noon, the escape chosen at night. Each moment whispers the same question: how long will you keep leaving yourself behind? This is where the emotional climax lives. Not in rage, not in noise, in stillness, in the unbearable intimacy of self-recognition. There is grief here. Let us not pretend otherwise. Grief for wasted time. Grief for old versions of yourself that died from neglect. Grief for dreams that remain dreams because fear kept winning in quiet moments. But grief, when allowed, becomes sacred, because it means something inside you is still alive enough to care. Indifference is far more dangerous than pain. Pain means your spirit still remembers what it was meant for, and maybe that is the most human truth of all. Beneath the exhaustion, beneath the habits, beneath the self-betrayal, there remains a part of you that refuses to fully die. A quiet ember, small but stubborn. It burns when you hear the truth. It burns when you see someone living with integrity. It burns when you imagine the life you know is possible. That ember is not guilt. It is memory. The memory of your own potential. The memory of your own strength. The memory of the life that still waits if you are willing to pay the price of honesty. So the room becomes quieter. The pace slows. You breathe. You feel the years. You feel the weight of choices. You feel the ache of knowing that no one is coming to rescue you from yourself. And yet, within that ache, there is a strange peace, because for the first time, you are no longer pretending. For the first time, the pain has meaning. It is not merely suffering. It is awakening. The world outside remains the same city lights, the same responsibilities, the same unfinished tasks waiting for tomorrow. But something inside has become still enough to hear life clearly. It whispers that there is still time, not endless time, just enough to return, enough to rebuild, enough to become honest in action, not only in thought. And perhaps that is the deepest point of all. Life does not demand that you erase the past. It asks only that you stop repeating it unconsciously. The tears you never showed, the exhaustion you never named, the quiet resentment toward yourself. Let it all surface, let it all breathe.